Hello and welcome to this OpenTX Quick Tip. Now, most of the tips that have been on the channel so far have been around things like flying wings, airplanes, quadcopters, and those kind of setups as well. And I'm starting to do more with radio-controlled car and trucks. And this is the result of an email that I got from a gentleman called Gary Rushton that has a 1:12 scale excavator that he has lots of technology on. Now, he controls it using the sliders for each of the tracks, and he also has things like sound making equipment. He's got lights, you name it. He's got loads and loads of stuff on this. Now, Gary recently installed a smoke blower so that when the engine starts he can get a bit of smoke out of it, or when he's moving it around. And what he really wants to do is have the smoke unit activated automatically in one of three conditions. He obviously wants to be able to control it directly with a switch so that he can flick a switch on the radio, and the radio we're using for this is the Taranis radio. You don't have to have a specific radio control for cars to run radio cars and trucks. The Taranis is a fantastically capable radio, and because it's bristling with switches and rotating controls, it can control pretty much anything. So the first way he wants to control it is just by flicking one of the switches on the radio. The second way he wants to control it, he has a sounder unit on this truck as well. So when he engages the sounder unit, as the initial noise is being made of the engine coughing to life, he wants some smoke to come out the stacks. But he only wants that to happen at the initial flick of the switch for about 6 seconds, and then he wants the smoke to stop. And the last way that he wants the smoke to start automatically coming out of his model is if he actively starts to move it around. So if he moves one of the two sliders that he's using to control each of the tracks from its middle detent, that middle position of the channel, as he moves either of those, he wants the smoke to automatically start coming out as well. So what I've done here in OpenTX, I've actually created a little model, and I'll go through and show you how relatively easy it is to get the Taranis and OpenTX to make this happen. So here's my little truck model. The inputs, I've got very simple inputs in here. I've just got the steering connected to the aileron control. That's the one on the right hand side. This is a Mode 2 radio that I'm using here. So as I push the aileron left and right, it's going to move the model left and right. It's going to do the steering. And then I've got two other inputs which are for the throttles connected to the two sliders. So there's one for the left slider and there's one for the right slider, and that's all the inputs that I've got. I'm sure in Gary's real model there's an awful lot of others, but for simplicity we're just going to control those. Now in the mixes we have the steering output. Now that steering is going to be connected again to that aileron control, that aileron stick, so that he can steer it left and right. So in channel 1 he's going to plug his steering servo into there. And he's also got the two controls here. These will be plugged into the ESCs running the motors for the individual tracks on the left and right hand side. And they're all just, those top three things are all connected to these inputs. So there's nothing particularly exotic in there. Now I've pretended that channel 4 is going to be where he connects the sound making device to, that's going to make the sound of the engine running. So that would be where that would be plugged into. And channel 5 is the channel that the smoke producer is going to be plugged into. And surprise, surprise, because there are three things that he wants to happen, there are three different things set up here. So let's start with a very simple one, just connecting it onto a switch. So I've just called it smoke. No. Let's try and keep it straightforward, then we can try and, particularly with complex models, it's worthwhile using descriptive English language in your setups. Otherwise, when you're trying to troubleshoot stuff or figure something out 6 months after the fact, it's a nightmare to figure it out. Just connected to SB, nothing else is set, apart from I've set the multiplex to replace, because I want these three to be either or, so they don't add up together. Now what that means is I just simulate that. Here's my Taranis radio, switch B. Now if you remember, channel 5 is the one that has the smoke connected. So as I move switch B, there we go, look at that. I can turn the smoke on and off with a switch. Now the next thing that he was after, of course, is being able to enable the smoke for 6 seconds when he turns on channel 4, which is the connection for the sounder unit. So let me just show you how that works. So watch over here. So channel 4 is connected to the thing that's going to make the engine noise. Channel 5 is connected to the smoker. So as I turn the engine noise on, there's the smoker will turn on, and it will turn on for 6 seconds. And after a 6-second pause, it'll turn off and the smoke will finish, but the engine's still running and it's all tickety-boo. If he turns the engine off again and then turns it back on, then he's going to get another 6-second puff of smoke up the stacks on the model. Now the way that that's done, that's relatively straightforward. We're using good old logical switches, and that is all done by this first little bit here. So what it's saying is, we're saying when A is greater than X is the function we're using, where A is channel 4. Now channel, if you remember, channel 4 is the sounder. So all we're saying here is in the logical switch, when the sounder value, the channel value goes above -99. If you remember, the channels on OpenTX go from -100 to +100, with 0 being the middle value. So basically, if it goes above the very bottom value and the switch isn't in the back position, we don't necessarily need that, but I find it's working better this way. So if SA has already moved out of position and channel 4 has gone up, then for a duration of 6 seconds, turn logical switch 1 on. Now that seems really complicated. All we're saying is when channel 4 moves off the very lowest channel value, then turn on for 6 seconds. And you can see that here. So if I turn off, just wait for everything to reset because I didn't start it. There we go. Now watch what happens with logical switch 01 when I turn on the noise. Logical switch 1 turns on, and surprise, you'll see channel 5 will stay on, and when logical switch 1 goes off, channel 5 goes off. And that's because all I've done here in the outputs, or in the mixes even, I've done this next bit where I'm saying the source is max. I'm not bothered about a source. I don't want source turned on. I just want there to be the value on the channel, the maximum value. The switch is going to the logical switch, which we've just set up, and again we're setting it to replace, so it's one or the other. Now that means that every time we turn on did it automatically again, every time we turn on the engine sounder, we get 6 seconds of smoke, and then it times out and drops back. Now of course, if we wanted to change the amount of smoke that we got, if that was too much and it was still smoking when the engine noise had gone from the startup noise to running, then obviously we change the duration. It's currently set to 6 seconds. The last one is a little bit trickier, and what Gary was after was the ability to, if you moved any of these two sliders off their middle neutral positions, and remember that these are the ESCs that you get in cars and trucks, so the middle channel position, or 0, is going to be no throttle. If it moves forward, it's going to be moving the ESC in a forward direction. Going below 0 to -100 is going to be going backwards. So what he wanted is, if any of these move, it automatically starts blowing smoke. So let's just test that. Again, you're looking at channel 5 here. So we're going to turn the model using one of the sliders to run the motor, and you'll see that as soon as I take either of the sliders away from the middle channel position, channel 5 comes on and the smoke comes on. Now I would maybe add a couple of delays to this, just because at the moment, as soon as you do it, the smoke's going to turn on, and then as soon as you stop moving, the smoke turns off. You might want it to wait another second or so. But let me show you how that works. That's a little bit more complicated. The first thing we need to do is we need to check when channels 2 and 3, and again if we look in the mixes, channels 2 and 3 are the two throttles connected to either of the tracks on the model. So in logical switches, we're checking when 2 and 3 are moving away from 0. And remember, 0 is the middle channel position, goes from -100 to +100. So when it moves off either of those positions, those middle indented movements on the radio, logical switch 2 and 3 are going to come on. So let me just show you that little bit. Keep your eyes on logical switches 2 and 3. So as I move it around, when they're both in the middle position, they're on. So if I move the LS, as soon as it comes out of that slider, moves away from the middle position, you can see that logical switch 2 is going off. When they're both back in the middle position, then fantastically both of the logical switches are on. If I move them both off it, both of the logical switches are off. Now what we can do is we can use that with one last logical switch that we're actually going to use for the function. So in logical switch 4, we're saying if either logical switch 2 or 3, and the exclamation mark here means when it's not, it's the inverse of. So if I was looking for either logical switch 2 or 3 to be on, then I would have just LO2 or LO3 for the two logical switches. Because I've got the exclamation mark in front of them, which is the inverse, the way it works is that if each of these are popped back into their middle position, let me just see if I can make it do it. It's a bit finicky trying to do it on the screen with a mouse. With the indent on the real radio, it's going to be easier. Let me just pop. There we go. Right. So when both of the middle channel positions are there and it's on 0 and 0, the model isn't moving, the truck is sat still, none of the ESCs are actually turning, then logical switch 4 isn't on. However, if we move any of these controls at all, then logical switch 4 comes on. And that is something we can use to, guess what, do exactly the same thing again in mixes. This time we can have source max, and this time rather than logical switch 1, which we did this last time, we're having logical switch 4. Again, we're switching replace. So that means that those three lines, supported by these logical switches, which are detecting when channels are moving away from a predefined position, is pretty standard stuff. So again, here we have let's put SA back at the default position so we're set. There we go. So channel 4 is the sounder, and as I turn that on, we get 6 seconds of channel 5 coming on, which is the thing that's going to make the smoke. Once the engine has started, that turns off. And then as we move the model, anytime I move the model, I'm getting a puff of smoke until I drop it back to the middle position for both of the treads, and then that turns off as well. So hopefully, Gary, that helps with you. Surprise, surprise, OpenTX will let you do it. There's probably other ways to crack this one, but that is the way that I would do it. So set your logical switches like this, replace the different channels for the ones that match your actual model memory. And again, in the mixes, you're going to have to then, for whichever output the smoke module is connected to, you're going to have these three mixes to either have it on a switch, have it for 6 seconds after you enable the engine sound, or have it coming on automatically if you move the tracks. If you found that video useful or like the content, then please hit the like and subscribe button down below. If you want to go the extra step, you can become a Patreon of the Painless 360 channel and help provide support for what I do here. All the videos created here are put into playlists, so if you're interested in a particular topic, have a look at the playlist, and they all are organised in there to make them easier to use. If you're not sure if there's a video for your particular problem or topic you want to know more about, then add Painless 360 to the Google search term that you're interested in, and that should find the video, article or content about the particular thing that you're interested in having a look at.